Excited to be here with you. I recognize that I'm the only thing that stands between you and probably a nice dinner. So we'll make this as long or as short as you guys want. But I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about marketing attribution. One thing that would help me a little bit in just making sure I craft this message a little bit is how many of you, just so I can get a lay of who we've got here, how many of you are with an agency by raise of hands? Okay, so a decent amount. Is it safe to assume that everybody else is with an individual brand, whether that be consumer goods, services? Okay, fantastic. So I'll try and craft a little bit of it for both of you because you might look at it a little differently. And we work closely. We actually work closely with a couple of different agencies in a lot of our strategic planning as well as our digital efforts. And so I'll loop that in as well. And then I guess I got to ask the other key thing. How many of y'all are Utah Jazz fans? All right, good. There we go. The rest of you, my hope is that you're converted by the end of the day. But one of the cool things about being the head of marketing for an NBA team is sometimes I get a chance to come up and speak and talk to people. And regardless of what my topic is, I still get a chance, because you really have no control over this, of sharing you something that's really cool about the Utah Jazz. So this has nothing to do with my topic today, but I'm going to force you to watch what's really cool about the Utah Jazz organization and the fact that we're celebrating 40 years in Utah.
Who could have imagined all this? In the summer of '79, the Jazz came to Utah. And people wondered, could it last? Would it work? But over the years, this franchise has grown with the city. You became fans. The best fans. Utah Jazz fans. Win or lose, hope or heartbreak, this team was yours. You cheered for every rookie, every player, every coach. You listened to the voices on the sidelines. These trophies are your trophies. These jerseys are your jerseys. These records are your records. This is your history. This is the 40th season of the Utah Jazz.
Left pass in front of McCray. McCray, three-pointer. He got it.
Jazz go for the win. Nice move. Inside control. Gives to Gaines at the horn. He got it.
C on a dribble drive, push shot. Joe, three, history. Yeah! Rebound. Oh, my!
Stockton, open three. Hit it! John Stockton sends the Utah Jazz to the NBA Finals.
So if you're a Jazz fan, you just got the chills right there, right? Remembering what that was. Really cool to be part of an organization like the Utah Jazz. Never thought that I'd be in the position that I am. I can't say that I ever had aspirations for it, but I'm not complaining one bit about what I get to do on a daily basis. So let's talk a little bit about digital marketing today. I can promise you I am probably not going to be as technical as what sounds like some of your previous discussions have been. And so we're going to talk a little bit at a higher level here. One of the things that I think is cool as we look towards 2019 is what the forecasters are telling us. eMarketer recently came out and said that they're forecasting in 2019 digital ad spends to increase by 19%. That increase will put the total U.S. ad spend, digital ad spend, at just over 54%, finally surpassing traditional media. So what does that mean to us, those of us who are focused on digital marketing, but also probably some of you out here have those traditional roots and are focused on that as well? Well, it's good news and it's bad news. There's some challenges in the fact that this makes the landscape a bit more competitive, right? We've got to find unique ways and smart ways to stand out amongst others. It could increase rates and costs on all of us, and so we're always going to have that question of what's our money doing for us, and is it really working for us? But ultimately, at the end of the day, I see it as a very strong positive. I have always been a big believer in digital marketing and have pushed towards that. Can't say that I've always fully understood everything, but as we all know, the environment is changing on a regular basis, so as we keep up, we can continue to learn on that. But what it ultimately allows us to do, especially in my role, is it allows me to get the corporate buy-in that I need to be able to go in and shift more dollars there, and then ultimately I'm going to be better served when I'm asked the question by those in the organization of, hey Bart, what's our return on ad spend? Is our money working for us? Is what you're doing anything? Because I think we probably all, regardless of our roles, we're getting asked that, right? But attribution modeling is not an easy thing. It's not something that we just comes out of the box and works for us. I think all of us in here, true to this quote, we all understand the value of attribution. But there are some difficult things to understand. And I will tell you, I don't understand it all. There's probably some things we might go through here, and some of you might say, Bart, you might be a couple years behind on that. That's great, though. But that's what I want you to look at as each individual journey. Because as I said, it's not something that just comes out of the box on this. So the question becomes, why do we as marketers struggle to advance these attribution efforts? We all want to, right? Just by a raise of hands in here, who in here has somewhat of a responsibility or a focus on reporting back on marketing spend? Whether that's for a client or whether that's for yourself. Okay, not everybody. If you didn't raise your hand, I promise you it's coming soon. or maybe you should be looking at that a little bit more and adding some of that commentary to the discussion there, because you could be of great value in that. Well, there's a few things. One, as stated in the quote before, a lack of understanding. It's challenging. We'll go through and I'll talk a little bit about that today. There's a lot of different ways in which we could approach that, and there's things that can get in the way with that. Part of that is, as I mentioned before, lack of company-wide buy-in. It takes investment into measuring what that return is. And sometimes we just want to feel like it's just magically there. And there are certain ways with minimal cost that we can get, or we can share some insights, but it may not be fully transparent, and it may not be completely accurate in there. We have difficulties in accessing the right data, right? And I'm sure we can all say that. We know what we want to get, but there's challenges. We've got to try and figure out at the end of the day, how do we get to that data? As part of that, there's a problem with technology and integrating that data into a consumable format so that we actually know what we're dealing with, right? And then, as I mentioned before, transparency and the accuracy reporting can be challenges as we try to advance this. And I'll talk a little bit more about transparency on here, but accuracy is a very key component to this as well, because there's a lot of ways, as I mentioned, that we can look at this. Most importantly, and that's what I want to make sure we understand today before we go through this journey, is I would argue that in all situations and scenarios, there is no one-size-fits-all solution for any of us in here. It's got to be based upon what your business objectives are and what you have access to And you can only understand that by going through the process of really fully vetting that and understanding what you need to accomplish as a business unit. Because at the end of the day, we've still got every CFO in our ear telling us and asking us, what's the return? You're going to hear me say ROAS, return on ad spend. I don't know how much of you, I apologize, I just use it too much. But what's our ROAS? We've all got people asking us what it is, right? And where it's working. And so as we look at this, we've got to ask ourselves what type of attribution modeling do we want to create for our organization? And there's a ton of these that we could do. I mean, when you look at digital attribution, there might be last click you might be looking at. You might be looking at first click. You might be looking at view through or click through conversions. If you want to go into a little bit more of multi-touch attribution, there's a ton of different ways that you could look at: linear, position-based, time decay, algorithmic, or a holistic view on here. This is where we start to get that lack of understanding, and for some of us, including myself, a little bit of fear and trepidation of, oh shoot, how do I really define this? And how do I really know if what we're doing is working and meaningful? Again, let me remind you, one size does not fit all on here. I'm going to take you through a little bit of our journey on that and how we get to it, but really going in and building a true attribution model is going to take a lot of time and internal discussion on what you want to do. Because when we look at it, all of us are probably doing some sort of attribution. We might just be simply looking at who we're reaching out there. I'm hopeful all of us are doing that. Some of us might be getting a little bit further down the road, and we might be looking at campaign ROIs. We might be looking at that on individual channels and platforms, because we can get some great native analytics and information from some of those systems, right? And from some of those platforms. Some of us might be looking at attribution model. Obviously, we have advertising going through a wide variety of channels, different platforms, and we need to be able to determine what's working in there and what's not working. And all of those platforms or channels have a role to play in that customer path or customer journey to conversion. Now, holistic view, if any of y'all are in here doing it, I'd love to pick your brain afterwards. This is great, but this is probably I will just say it's a much more complex environment than what the Utah Jazz are looking at. This is bringing in offline, online data. This might be looking at weather for retail sales and how it impacts it. This is definitely a part that can be brought in. We're not going to focus on that today. I'm going to focus with what I'm most comfortable with, and that's multi-channel attribution up here. So let me start a little bit of what happened about 2 years ago. About 2 years ago is when I was placed in my current role as the head of marketing for the Jazz. This was in, this would have been in the summer or spring, May of 2017. And so I had the opportunity to come in, and we had a summer worth of planning, and there had been a lot of planning and strategy done. And one of my first questions was, okay, what's working for us, right? I'm talking to my different teams, and I've got probably 5 or 6 different teams, media and promotions. I've got digital teams, both platform and content. I've got analytics teams that focus on customer analytics, as well as customer experience, all of this. And I'm trying to get these answers. And at the end of the day, really what I get is we have no idea. We really didn't have any type of attribution and model in place. So when I asked what our return was on our ad spend, which was obviously the first question I got asked by our CFO after they introduced me, I said, I'll find it out. And quite frankly, we didn't. And so what I went to is what I knew best. At that time, we had 70% of our budget was traditional media, TV, billboards, specifically static billboards, radio. Again, great platforms in which we can tell a Utah Jazz type story, right? Very emotive, a lot of video, very high impact things. Great stuff. Cannot tell you if it impacted the buyer's decision to purchase or not. And don't get me wrong, Those were questions that were asked to me by our team president and others of, could we just shut it all off? Do we really need to market? Bart, prove to us. Now, he's not serious about that, but at the same time, he's telling me, prove it to me that we need it. So we made a huge shift. I was able to go in and talk with our team and explain to them what we wanted to do here. And we made, in 17-18, we made a complete shift. 70% of our budget went to, we knew was going to go to digital media, and we had a specific objective in mind for that 30% of traditional media. Getting that buy-in was key. What this allowed us to do was be able to go in and create, in essence, a baseline year. We had to build a model that would allow us to track it, but we built this, in essence, I got permission to say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do a ton of testing. And we're going to actually find out what's working. Don't ask me what it should be doing. I'm just going to tell you if it is working. And so we went out and we tried to find every digital platform we could possibly find, and we wanted to experiment on it. And we did that. And this is only a small sampling, but we did go a mile wide on all of that. And we attributed budget to each and every one of it. And we decided we're going to test, we're going to measure, and we're going to adjust, right? Those are the key things that we want to do in marketing. Well, that's easier said than done because we run into problems, right? There's some simple problems. Let me give you an example of a simple problem that we ran into before we built out this attribution model. There was an idea we could rely more so upon the individual platform's metrics. So let's take the example. This is going to be very simple. We've got a customer. We serve them up a Google display ad. They click on it. That obviously costs us $5. Then they don't convert on that, but then we serve them up a Facebook ad. That costs us $5. And ultimately, they come in and they purchase tickets for $100, right? So what's my return on ad spend? Well, for some of us, we may go and we may look at Facebook, and Facebook is going to tell us, hey, we converted $100 on it, and only cost us $5, $20 ROAS, right? Well, I'm going to go over to, did I say that about Facebook? Then I'm going to go over to Google, and they're going to tell me the exact same thing, right? And I'm going to go and I'm going to look at both of these channels, and I'm going to say, I cannot sacrifice any money on either of these channels. When in reality, it was actually a $10 ROAS, and I still have yet to be able to determine how much impact the Google display ad had and how much impact the Facebook ad had in driving that $100 of revenue. So that's a simple little conundrum. Let me share with you what it's really like in our world. Let's say we're at the beginning of the season here, and we've got a Lakers fan that's living in Salt Lake. They go on and they want to look at Jazz versus Lakers fans, or tickets in here. So they click on a paid search ad. They go into our site. They come in. They look at the Lakers tickets and like, you know what? For whatever reason, I'm not going to convert. This is key for us, is getting them into that part of that funnel. We've got great tracking on our website so that we understand and can see what the behaviors are, and then we have a variety of ways in which we can remarket to them. Obviously, upper funnel, maybe lower funnel, wherever that comes in, we've got that opportunity. So now what we can go in and do is we can deliver up on a retargeted ad on any type of Google Display Network. That's going to be specifically about Lakers tickets. They come in again on that. We get them to come into the site. They look at it. Again, they decide not to click on it for whatever reason. Then we bring in email, right? We know that they've hit 2 touch points, so we automate after 2 touch points on the same game that we're going to serve you up a ad for whatever team that was. We served up the email. They went into the site. I don't know if, and they didn't click. I don't know if you saw the desktop image there. If you noticed, maybe they're a little bit worried about the state of the Lakers and whether they're really going to be that good and whether LeBron's really going to play. And so finally on here, we go in and we serve them up a Facebook ad because we know they're still interested. They click on it. They go into the single game tickets here. They scroll through. They stop at the Lakers ad. Well, they keep scrolling. I guess they go into the Warriors game. And they're looking around, and they ultimately buy 2 tickets at $700 a piece. And according to their desktop image, they've been fans since day one. This is not unique. I promise you, this happens. And I'm talking not just about the path. I'm talking about Lakers fans converting in midseason to Golden State Warriors fans. Apologize for those of you that are Lakers or Warriors fans out there. So again, what of this gets the credit? We know in our world that currently it takes 6.9 touch points, add touch points, for someone to ultimately convert into ticket sales. I've got to determine and understand what of that is working best, and can I minimize that 6.9 touch points on there? So if we were to look at this, if we looked at last click, Facebook's going to say they got the credit. If we wanted to look at first click, Google search is going to say they got the credit for it. We're going to look at each of these natively, and they're all going to say they got the credit for it. And I'm going to go back to my bosses if I want to, and I'm going to say Facebook is killing it. Search is killing it for me. Email is killing it for me. And I could do that, right? Because quite frankly, they're not going to know the difference on that. If I'm comparing myself against the other NBA teams, and I'll be honest with you, I see what they report on it. A lot of them are doing that. And they go in, and when I meet with the NBA, they're like, wow, why is your guys' ROAS not as high as everybody else? And I have to explain to them, that's not how we want to look at it, because it's not really telling us the truth. So at the end of the day, what is the truth, right? And where do we start on this? Well, some of us might go in and say we've got to set a target ROAS, right? I don't know if maybe some of you feel like that might be the right thing. I would argue that it's probably not. You might look at industry averages and say, okay, what's a proper ROAS? You might go in and look at, or finance might come down and give you a directive of this is the type of ROAS that we need out of the marketing department. In my opinion, my philosophy, that's all wrong. The number itself does not matter, at least initially. What matters is once you've established what true and transparent, through transparent data, what actuality really is, then you measure that simply off of trend and growth. And if you continue to grow, that means you're being agile as a marketer. You're making the adjustments, whether that be for channel and platform, or that may be in messaging. And you make those tweaks and adjustments, and that's where you determine whether your money is really working for you. Now, this is going to start with, I like to look at it from a three-step approach, and I'll kind of tell you how we did this. We first needed a very comprehensive tracking plan. Again, as I mentioned, a ton of different platforms that we were advertising on. Then, I'm a big believer in about an 80% science and 20% art mix on how to get this. Let me reiterate, one size does not fit all. After going through an extended period of time of dialogue and discussion internally, this is what we got to that's right for the Utah Jazz right now. So if we're going to start with tracking, let me take you through what we did from tracking. And this hopefully this works a little bit for how some of you would want to do it. As a marketing department, we began including URL parameters on everything that we put out. This is paid channels as well as free channels. We obviously have a lot of reach on our free channels as well, and so we have an opportunity to do that, whereas some folks may not have that same option. This allows us obviously then to know that when a customer clicks on our site, we know exactly where they came from, and then you can see here we know exactly how they got there. In this link, it's going to show us channel, it's going to show us platform, and it's going to show us campaign. But we also needed consistency. I also said that we work with multiple agencies. I've got multiple people creating content and pushing this out. If there's no consistency in that, then I can't have my analytics team come back and really show me what that campaign or what that channel's doing. So we built, analytics team, kudos to them, they built this, it's just an Excel. It's in essence a drop down where you can select a channel from the drop down menu. Then you go and you enter the name of the campaign, enter the web page where the customer should land, and it's going to spit you out a link with all the parameters, and there's consistency regardless of who does it. Our agencies use this same tool to help so that we can create consistency as we go back in on that. So, using various platforms, we capture all this large amount of data here. including our website data and all of these URL parameters. Then these platforms combine data across our Jazz site as well as our Ticketmaster site so that we can see where people are going and where they're converting at that. And this allows us to track that visitor from when they first click an ad and any additional click or interaction since then, ultimately to conversion on that. We've got a great data warehouse where we're able to put all this data into the same thing, or into the warehouse, and we link it together with our marketing spend information and our sales information, and then ultimately this allows us to then put all this together, set attribution parameters on it, add our spend, our traffic, orders, revenue, everything across all these channels. This just gets us to the tracking part, right? To where we really have true and meaningful data so that when someone comes back and asks me, whether that's my boss, whether that's a CFO, is this legit? I can walk them through this and tell you, I am giving you the most transparent information that I can possibly come up with. Because I've also convinced them that stop asking me if our ROAS should be $4, $5, $6. Let me just show you where we're growing and that we're growing on it. But for us, we have to look at this through a variety of ways, right? Science is kind of the next component to that. I talked about 80%. And for us, science happens at the conversion level. That's the key thing for me. I want to know specifically what channels are converting very well for me because, again, we are a revenue-focused business, and a lot of our ticket revenue specifically comes in off of our website. And so we then look at this as, in essence, a last click conversion here. And we've got part of our scorecard that we can go in and we can look at this. We can look at each one of these channels in here, even down to the platform level, and I can look at revenue year over year. I can look at what we're spending year over year. I can look at our return on ad spend year over year. And that gives me an idea of what channels at the bottom of that funnel are really converting well with. And I can add a little bit of fuel to that fire with some money, and I can see what happens, and I can see it actually in real time with the way that we've built this and see if it's impacting it or not, which is great. I can even go in, if I want to look specifically at the campaign level, I can drill down. Teams built this out great. From an email standpoint, I can look at specific channels on social media, whether that's paid or free, and go and determine how that's performing for us on a channel level or on a campaign level. But that's part of it, right? I just went back and said, if you look just at last click conversion, that's not going to tell you a complete story. We've got to continue to look at the areas of the funnel higher up on that. Because if all I focus on, and this is true as I analyze the data, if I just focused on our conversion channels, my pool of folks would ultimately dry up and we'd be running out of people. We've got to bring people into our site, and we've got to bring unique people into it. And my conversion performing channels are not the ones that do that. And so within this, we come in and we extend this further. For me right now, an objective this year is extending our reach. For those of you who've watched the Jazz, I'm a believer that if I can get you to come in and look at some highlights of Donovan Mitchell, or if I can get you for the first time to come to a Jazz game, there was somebody that mentioned, tell me your name. John. You brought your wife to her first game. I have a feeling at some point down the road, she's probably going to ask some more questions about the Jazz. And she's probably going to ask you when the next time is we're going to go and when you're going to take your kids, right? Because with the way that our team is right now, if I can just get you in, then there's probably going to be multiple ways in which I can ultimately get you to convert. And now's as good a time as ever. From a Utah Jazz basketball standpoint, we're as exciting as I think we've ever been. The demand is crazy. We've sold out 63 straight games. We've got to take advantage of that, right? So I need to pull people in. So I'm going to look at web traffic. I've got channels out here that do not convert well. But when you compare it in relation to the monetary spend, they bring more traffic to my site than anyone else. And when I have that in there, like I said, we've got great tracking tools, and then we can remarket to them to better conversions, or if it takes multiple touch points for them, we're in good shape. I'm even going to go in and I'm going to look at click-through. We do a dedupe model with one of our agencies where we go in and we dedupe conversion, and we look at that on a click-through and a view-through conversion so that I can see I've got a big bucket that falls into of revenue that falls into direct. I think people know pretty well when they want to convert at times to come straight to utahjazz.com. Sometimes we can't link all of that together. Sometimes the data just isn't there for whatever reason, and so we've got a big bundle there. I can still go in and analyze that revenue and determine what is driving, or what are those key platforms and channels that are driving that conversion ultimately, right? I may even want to look at impressions, whether that's digital, and combine that with my traditional impressions to see what type of reach I'm getting. This is where that art comes into play. I've got key science on my conversion. We play around with a lot of different numbers, and we're very agile in what we do. So we shift it around and we see what happened to these numbers, and ultimately it allowed us to be able to go in. And over the last 2 years, we took these digital platforms that were a mile wide, and we were able to pull some stuff out. And we were able to put more money into the key performing ones, both upper funnel, lower funnel. And what it allowed us to do is determine the overall impact of each of these channels relative to each other and place value upon that. You could go in and you could do a time decay model, and that may work best for you or for your client. Time decay, algorithmic. You can go in and you can build a lot of that. Our world changes so fast that I didn't want to be tied down to that. That's why I say you've got to look at it on an individual basis and go through that exercise. We were able to measure and test the performance of each of these individual campaigns, intelligently shift advertising spend across channels, and in some situations, we actually last year saved money. First year that I was able to go back to our CFO and the marketing department, give them back money, because ultimately we didn't need it, and we sold out our final 36 games of the season. And then we can allocate internal resources appropriately to wherever we're getting the highest impact. We've seen a lot of impact as we've put focus on strategic email marketing. So we've had to allocate some resources to ramp that up there. At the end of the day, the question is, you go through all this work, and I would hope as each of you go through that work, it takes time, it takes a little bit of blood, it takes some tears, especially in some of the conversations, maybe with your IT group or others. At the end of the day, does it help? What I can tell you is that midway through this season, our online revenue is up 70% year over year. Our digital ad spend, our traditional ad spend is flat compared to previous year. Our digital ad spend is down 49%. But yet our online revenue is up 78%. Meaning our return on ad spend is up 251%. And we can see that direct correlation. That's what allows us, as you see through this cool gift for the Utah Jazz marketing team, to every once in a while we get to walk into the room and we get to feel as cool as what I assume it is to be like Donovan Mitchell. I really want to get the chain and see if I can get that going in there. But this is where it comes. And this is where I talk about how it's baseline and then it's growth off of that. And it's tweaking and adjusting the dials. We adjust on a weekly and on a monthly basis based upon what we're seeing in there. And it's been very beneficial for us. So let me leave you with a couple of key takeaways here. One, as you go back, I would encourage you to reevaluate what your current attribution model is, right? If you don't know, even if it's not your responsibility, if you don't know what that is, learn what that is and figure that out, because that will become a very valuable arrow in your quiver as you continue to progress in your career. Then you've got to determine what you want to do in the future. This is probably the biggest challenge. What is really important to you in measuring your return on ad spend? It may not be conversions for revenue. I assume that's probably going to be part of the mix, but there may be other key things that you've got to look at organizationally that you need to measure. And you've got to be able to go in and identify that. Then you've got to figure out where that data is. Then you've got to figure out how to cross that with all of your other data to make sure that it's pure, it's transparent. But you can get there. I promise you, you can get there. It may take some salesmanship internally, but it happens. Then you've got to identify what data and technology is needed. I hope that many of you are very close friends with IT. If marketing departments and IT departments are not very strategically aligned right now, you might be doing it wrong, because they are going to help immensely in this. And then you need to identify who you need to get on board to make it happen. For me, I had to get to the highest level and get them to be willing to let me take a fairly significant sum of money and say, folks, I'm just going to test the heck out of this for a year. I know we just lost Gordon Hayward. I know we have no idea how good this team is going to be. But if I don't start now, when are you going to let me start? And if you want answers to those questions, this is what we've got to do it. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, you as an individual, need to be that champion. You need to be the one that champions getting to radical transparency, making sure that what we're talking about is true. I'm telling you, it feels so much better when you can sit down in front of people and say, I'm telling you, this is what the information says, what the data says. Let's just now manage to it. We're all pretty darn good at tweaking the dials. And when we get a group of people in the room to help us tweak those dials, it's great as well. That's my thoughts. I'll invite Wayne up here.
Okay, thank you,
questions,
Bart.
Right?
Yep, we're going to do some Q&As. We got about 9 minutes. Do we have runners ready with microphones? Oh, we're going around. We got a couple questions over there. Yeah, just keep your hand raised. We'll get microphones to you. We're going to start right here with John. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks so much. So I've got a couple questions. One, I would assume like seasonality, right? Like you're probably certain times of year you're selling season tickets, mm-hmm. and then probably right now single game and then playoff tickets, merchandise. So I'm kind of curious, like how you tweak, like based on obviously season tickets, sure. A lot more expensive than a single game, and then also like B2B, right? I assume that corporations in the Valley, yeah, probably you're buying a lot of those. Mm-hmm. So like marketing to a business owner or a, right?
Sure.
So that was my first question. Then the second question is like leveraging CRM data. Mm-hmm. So like if you know somebody's a huge Donovan Mitchell fan, mm-hmm. like do you include that in some of your marketing?
Sure.
Because it's going to convert better than, something else?
It's a great two questions. Let me answer the first one fairly briefly initially. I will say yes, seasonality plays a big role in ours. The principles, at least as far as attribution go, still remain the same for us. We're able to build that into separate campaigns. The nice thing that we have right now is we have what I think is 92% renewal rate on our season tickets, and we don't have any more season tickets available or even half season tickets available. So I don't spend any money in that. We've got a great fan base, specifically our season ticket holders, and so it's not something that I have to focus on a ton right now. From a corporate partnership standpoint, that is definitely something. We've got a great team in there. That's where CRM plays a bigger role for us. We don't necessarily market to them. It's the nice thing about being the Utah Jazz in this market is all of those folks know who we are. We know who all of they are, and it helps us a little bit more. It's just trying to align partnerships. But when you talk about CRM data, that's a key component. For us, we have eliminated all third-party data. We don't touch it. We've got some great tools, inclusive of our CRM and great adoption on the CRM from what we're able to push into that, what our sales staff is able to push into that, and then combine that. And that's what we talked about in part of that section, was combining those platforms together to give us a much more comprehensive view. I hate saying 360, but we've got a pretty darn good view of our customers to then be able to go out and market based upon those interests or recent interactions with us. But the CRM is a key component to it, for sure.
Thank you. Okay, we got a question right over here.
Hi. I have like a million questions. I'll limit it to two, though. One is around when you say that growth, or you're able to increase online revenue by 251%. I'm curious how much of that you think is attributed to just the demand in tickets and how well the team is doing, and if you've had a chance to maybe compare with other NBA teams and maybe do an analysis of win percentage versus spend and what that looks like.
Sure.
And the second question is a little bit more of a fanboy question, but how much of your revenue or how much of your spend do you think is on? This is all very conversion based on ticket sales. How much do you actually attribute to maybe like the All-Star voting campaign or other player campaigns? And do you feel like as a small market team, do you have to spend more on that than maybe another team would have to?
Sure, really good questions. I'm going to go back to your first question, which was, I'm already drawing a blank on it because I was thinking about your second question.
First question was on, hold on,
Who's got the help there?
the team, the demand based on the win percentage.
Oh, yeah. So I get asked that same question. I told you whether we even needed a marketing budget as Utah Jazz. I also get that same thing. Bart, don't feed me any BS that this stuff is all working. Donovan Mitchell is our chief marketing officer. Enough said, right? Well, that's where, again, being able to go in and tweak the dials has been key for us in there, to be able to go in and confirm. And quite frankly, I'm okay. If that's the case and we really don't have to spend the money, I'm an operator by just by nature. I wouldn't say, honestly, marketing, I'm not the most creative guy. Me, it's operations and strategy and process. I'd say save the money. But as we go in and we're able to tweak the dial on an isolated basis, and this is part of that testing process because we can see all of it, we tweak it, we see the lift, and we go, okay, yes, this does in fact work. It does in fact impact. We also have a bunch of stuffs that I have for visualizations that try to quantify what the impact is of win percentages. I will say through that first half of the year right there, if you compare versus the previous year, our win record was actually quite close, very similar in that, but yet we were still able to drive the revenues up 78%. And I will add that with the fact that expectations were to start the season were a whole lot higher than for us to be a seventh seed, what we currently are, right? So I'm going to argue that as long as I can argue it. Your second question, it's a good question. Historically, I will tell you that the majority, if not 90 to 95% of our budget was identified for conversion-based ticket selling. We had to, again, I don't like the term small market per se, but our base of people to come is definitely smaller. We can compete, because when you say small market, people typically go to our ability to compete on the basketball court. That I don't consider us a small market as well, not with the Millers and what they've committed to the community and to how they've demonstrated that. As far as the ability to market to certain people, yes. And so this year was one of those first years where I was actually able to go off and break off some money and focus a little bit more on some of those brand building things. And again, the primary objective on there, which we are measuring, not specifically in that marketing scorecard, but as a part of what we start to build out as a holistic view, is our overall reach across the community. We've done specific things to try and get new people in. And historically, we used to just say, we used to deliver up an ad. Almost all of our ads were Jazz versus Lakers tomorrow night. And that's what, or it would have been Jazz versus Bulls tomorrow night. We would have put a Jazz player and a Bulls player up on that. We've now, even with Pinterest, we've gone out and done some Pinterest advertising to focus on date night ideas, to talk about, going, a daddy-daughter date, to talk about to the foodies, those different, more fringe folks that aren't necessarily interested in what's going on in the court, but that might be interested in the entertainment value. And so we're able to go in and do that, and we do recategorize that. I've got in there, if you look at deeper within our marketing scorecard, you'll see a channel of social brand and social tickets. And yes, the social tickets converts at a much higher rate. But we can see value in the social brand in the fact that I think it's our unique attendees to Jazz games this year is up over 25%. And that's really what we wanted to do, right? We wanted to get more people to come in and experience Utah Jazz basketball and get them into that funnel.
Wonderful. Okay, we got another question right here.
Hi. My question is, when you came on looking for channels to market through, what was your process in finding more channels to go through that were effective? And how many, or do you have an average of channels that kind of keep you in a place that you're not diluting your resources in marketing, that you're kind of playing in a field that your resources are being used in the best way, and you're staying in a place that makes sense for channels?
Yep, great question on that. Honestly, we had a huge brainstorm session with our agency that handles the majority of our digital media spend, and we asked them to lay everything out on the table, and I think there might have been 2 things that we didn't select. But within the first 2 months, we had already started chopping off that block. To whereas this year, when we started, search, email, remarketing to first-party data, Facebook and Instagram. That was it. Again, we saw some cool things with, with some cool ways of doing of remarketing, whether that's geofencing or whatever. And we had played with sites like KSL, and there's some great benefits to a site like KSL or Salt Lake Trib. It wasn't needed for what we were trying to accomplish this year on it, and so we have been. And that was exactly what I went to. My gal that runs all of our paid media was, okay, now your goal is, after you've already trimmed it down from last year, now we're going to go be experts in these fields. Now, what I also will say I challenged her with is, that's when I then challenged her with, now you're going to extend yourself in the messaging. So instead of just the buy tickets tomorrow, we went through a whole persona process where we identified everybody, and we wanted to go find some of these fringe fan bases and start communicating to them. And so that's where this year's testing has been in our messaging.
Perfect. Okay, we're out of time, but we'll do one last question right here in the front.
Great, thanks. Bart, thanks for your presentation. So you're in a fascinating business. I think viewership relative to NFL, MLB, PGA is down, whereas the NBA is just skyrocketed. And you see that in the values of franchises. I think compared to like 6 years ago, they've tripled or quadrupled in value. What do you attribute that to? And how do you see that affecting the way that marketing will change to this growing phenomenon of just popularity within the NBA?
Yeah, it's a good. That's actually a really good question. We'll make one tweak to what you said there. There was an article that recently came out, and NBA TV viewership is actually, for the first time in several years, is trending down on a league-wide basis, just nominally. And the reason why I wanted to clarify that on it is because Utah Jazz, though, are number 2 in the entire league. This is where small market comes into play. Don't give me small market BS. Number 2 by leaps and bounds of TV viewership, of people watching our game on that. I will tell you, I don't really know. That once we found that out, that's where I went to my analytics team and I proposed that same question based upon the same principle that you're asking. Okay, if this is the case, don't give me that, okay, we're a team on the rise. The Milwaukee Bucks are a team on the rise and have an MVP candidate, an exciting brand of basketball. He was the number 1 vote getter in the All-Star game. Their TV ratings are not what we are. And so, to answer your question, I will say one thing I think that the NBA has done really well that's attributing to a lot of our growth is their focus internationally. There is a big international focus, specifically on China, how we monetize, how we pull in viewership, all the things that they've been doing over the last several years to get that. I think that has a high impact on what you're seeing. I also think it's an organization or a league that, unlike some of the others, focuses on its players and allows its players to be authentic, sincere, and stand up for what they want, even when it may not align with their specific morals. Yeah, I won't go into the details on that, but there's some instances where I think that's a big thing. And we as a society, we want that and we crave that.